Welcome to the show, everyone. We've been having fun in here talking already just before the show. Now we're having fun networking with everyone out there. We're live on Facebook, so hi to everybody out there. Like us and follow us. We're going to be sharing the show in just a little bit. I cannot wait to bring on my first guest because I know he loves talking about what we're talking about. I have with me Troy Froderman, and he is one of the principals of the FRLaw Group. Welcome to the show. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what we're going to talk about, and why you love talking about it so much.
Thank you, Carol. So I've been practicing law here in Phoenix for over 30 years, and for many years I was with a large international law firm responsible for hundreds of lawyers, and it's better than any drama than you could probably watch on television. So after 28 years, a neighbor and I decided that we would start a small litigation practice and give us an opportunity to hone our skills in the areas of law that we really enjoy. Kind of like a golfer when they get into their 30s, that's the prime of their career. And for a lawyer, anywhere from the early 50s to the late 60s is the prime of our careers. So I wanted to spend that prime time, if you will, doing what I really have a passion for.
Well, I got an email from you today, and you said you really wanted to talk about a subject, and I love it. I mean, when we say this, because I'm not saying that I'm happy when it happens, but I love the way you did it. It's, oh no, I got sued. I'm getting sued. Tell everybody a little bit about the area of practice of the law that you like to work with, right? And what people should do, because a lot of people don't realize that when they get sued, they really got to make sure that they have somebody on their side like you.
So there are very few things other than being sued that freak people out. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet, loss of your home, the IRS, getting sued is right there along with all of that. It's an emotional toll that takes place, and it's a monetary toll that takes place. So they're really, if you want to think about it in terms of what we do, we're a litigation boutique, and what we do is we represent businesses, and we both sue other businesses as well as defend our clients who get sued by other businesses. And more to the point, what I do mostly is I represent policyholders when they get sideways with their insurance carrier. So just like individuals, businesses have their own insurance. And when they suffer a loss, and that loss could either be there's a large litigation that's taking place and they're a defendant and they think that they have coverage under their policy for their attorney's fees and costs and potentially the judgment that might happen or a settlement. And it could either be through a property loss, it could be through a mass tort action, whatever the case is. So I get retained to try to get the insurance company to come in and step up and defend the client and get the client indemnified should there be a settlement or a judgment. The other area of the law that we practice at FRLaw Group is construction litigation. My partner was a general counsel for a very large construction company, and he's also a construction engineer by trade. So we do a lot of work with construction companies, just as you might imagine, their day-to-day issues that they come across, as well as oftentimes we deal with their insurance carriers as well. So that's really where we come into play. And in terms of the subject, oh boy, I've been sued, what happens now? So there are some times when you can manage a risk and expect that there might be a dispute down the road. And that usually happens when there's a contract in place or there's a purchase order that is in place. Things that you can anticipate and you can kind of manage the risks. Other times, things just happen and you can't avoid that. An example is COVID-19. Not to dwell into that subject to any great extent, but there are a lot of lawsuits that are stemming from the pandemic between landlords and tenants, between customers for supply chains. The list is endless. So what happens generally is when somebody has either been sued or they're about to be sued, then that really calls into question, are you prepared to fight it? And because, like I said at the beginning, it's not just a fiscal issue, but it's also an emotional issue, and it's also time. If you're in the business of making bread and you get sued, do you want to spend 20% of your time dealing with lawyers, or do you want to spend as much time as possible making your product?
Kneading. You got to knead the bread. So I want to talk about this, that what I know about you too, is that what you've done is you've brought the big guns, the big gun lawyer, to the smaller person, that, business owner that can work with you, right? Because you brought that experience is what you've done. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that's how I would phrase it, is the experience that we bring. So we've had the good fortune of working with a lot of large clients who can afford much more than a smaller company to fight cases and to spend money and to throw lawyers at various issues. And so through that, you get a lot of training and you get a lot of experience. You get to know the judges, you get to know the back staff in the courthouse, which is always very helpful. And one thing that my mentor taught me, and my father did at an early age, is the person who is holding the door open for the jury is just as important as the judge. Treat everybody as if you'd want to be treated, and with respect. And so we bring that type of experience, insight to our clients, and we're not in a position where most of our clients they're not 3M, they're not GM.
Right.
They have a tight budget that they can afford to either prosecute or defend a lawsuit. And the number one thing that people don't really appreciate is a small case can take as much time as a large case. And so you need to be very upfront with your clients at the very beginning. Here's what to expect. If I were the client, I would not want a surprise at the end of the day and find out that a case that I thought was going to cost $20,000 to prosecute turns out to be $200,000. That's not a happy discussion at the end of that engagement.
Right. You would want to make sure that you talk to everybody and have that laid out beforehand. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, let's say somebody right now has just started a business, and a lot of people have, and they're hearing this and they're saying, well, gosh, I don't even know what to do to protect myself. Okay. Can they come to you to talk to you so that you can help them form what they need to, so that nothing down the line, I mean, it can happen no matter what, but that they are protected and make sure that they are?
Yes. In fact, we do that all the time, especially with startup construction companies, because my partner, Scott Ryan, he has that experience where he knows what needs to be in place at the very beginning of a project and at the end of the project. And so we're able to advise the clients, have you considered X, Y, and Z?
Well, let me say this, and this is the kind of thing when you're listening to this information here, and I love the show for that reason, because it is information for everybody out there, whether it's you or someone that you know that might need this right now. You might have gotten into something, you've just gotten sued. Oh boy, what do I do, right? Or maybe you want to make sure that you already are protected. You can call them direct. Their number is 602-566-7425. You can check them out on their website. It's FRLawGroup.com. But they're rated with the Better Business Bureau. They also work nationwide. So this is not just for us here, but nationwide as well. And check them out on their website. It's FRLawGroup.com. They do free consultations, and you can call them at 602-566-7425. Hang tight. We'll be back in just a minute. We're going to continue kind of talking. For you, one of the, when you're working with a smaller company, let's say, some of those smaller businesses out there, what do you want to maybe have a story that you might have? Because those are always kind of interesting too, as to who you might have worked with. So maybe before we go back to live, but we even talked to Facebook a little bit about maybe something that you have dealt with, that where people just, all of a sudden, maybe they didn't even realize they were getting, going to get sued, and it came into them,
Well, I mean, there are various different examples, but one of the things that I've noticed over the last 30 years is just the general spend that keeps increasing with technology. So you would think technology would make things a little bit more streamlined. That's not the case. So for example, when I first started practicing, there was no electronic storage of anything. It was, in a box behind our desk or at the client's office. And it was pretty easy to figure out what needed to be reviewed and what needed to be produced. Now, text messages, emails, everything. So what happens is if a client gets sued, the complaint comes along with a letter that's called a document preservation letter that says, you've been sued, you are under an obligation to not destroy any documents, whether they're hard copy, electronic, text messages, etc. And if you do, then there's a doctrine called spoliation, and you'll get a jury instruction read by the judge that says to the jury, they were told to keep these documents and they destroyed them. Because they destroyed them or they didn't maintain them, if they get overridden by the software, you are allowed to presume that the information was harmful to them.
Ooh.
Wow.
And so oftentimes we'll have a client will come to us and they did something back in 2019 and they get sued in September of 2020. They didn't know that they needed to keep, especially if it's a new client, we only keep emails for 30 days, that's our policy, etc.
Well, that's something to talk about too when we get back, because giving them that information as to now, first of all, everything is all about covering, your whatever, right?
Yeah.
And talking about to give them the information there to, you've got to keep this stuff for X amount of time, and how do we do that? I mean, you'd have to have every little email, every little text. It's crazy out there. But let's talk about that when we get back, okay? That's your.
I recognize the name.
So welcome back, everyone. We're talking with Troy Froderman, and he is one of the principals of FRLaw Group. And at the break, we're talking, we talk live on Facebook when we're not on live air. And you were talking a little bit about how technology has changed so much, and some people don't realize what they have to say, what they don't. So let's talk a bit about some of that.
Sure. So, again, not to sound like a grandfather here, 30 years ago when I started practicing law, you were not obligated to really produce what's called impeachment evidence. You could hold on to it. And you show up at trial, the witness is on the stand, and you may not even have anything in the impeachment envelope, but you just wanted to mess with the witness. And so the witness is on the stand, and you'd say, bailiff, will you please pass the impeachment envelope? And then the witness would just melt in the chair. Well, we can't do that anymore. There is no hiding of anything. In fact, it's just the contrary. You have to produce everything. So you would think that with technology that might streamline some of the process. It is not.
Completely the opposite.
It's completely the opposite, because you'll receive a lawsuit in the mail, and most times with the lawsuit, the complaint, there will be a letter from the opposing counsel, and it says, you are instructed not to destroy any documentation related to this particular subject. And even if you have a doubt as to whether it's related to the subject, you have to maintain it. And that includes hard copies, emails, texts, whatever's on your server, your backup tapes, you got to save all of that. So here's what happens. So a new client comes to FRLaw Group or to a law firm and says, hey, I just got sued. I'd like to interview to see if you'd be the right fit for us. And I want to talk about right fit in a second. So have that meeting, and you say to the potential client, did you maintain all of your documents? What's your document retention policy? And sometimes they'll say, well, we don't destroy anything, we keep everything, or we've got a 7-year document retention policy, or we have no policy, we just
throw everything away.
Yeah. So what happens is that if documents or data, more to the point, is not preserved, and you end up going to trial, the judge will, not just the lawyer, but the judge will read to the jury an instruction that says they didn't maintain the data, and because they did not maintain it, you can presume they did it because it wasn't going to help them, that it was bad for them. And that's a terrible instruction, especially when it's your client that the instruction is regarding.
Right.
So it's very important that you, as soon as you even think that you might be sued, if you have a lawyer on retainer, contact that lawyer and say, hey, this particular job didn't go as well as we thought it did, and is there anything that we need to do?
I think you're right, absolutely, because anything can happen to anybody at any time, even if you're just a sole proprietor like me, because you never know when somebody else, doesn't have to be just in business with somebody or what have you, and somebody else might come to you and do something, and you got to document everything right now, and he's saying in every aspect, whether it's your text, email, what have you. You also talked a little bit about how you wanted to talk about the right fit.
Yes. And
let's talk a little bit about what that is.
So one of the things that we pride ourselves on at FRLaw Group is that we're a very small shop. We have 4 lawyers. We do not advertise ourselves as being experts in everything. We specialize in insurance and in construction. And if you have an issue related to one of those 2 subjects, we will be the right people for you because we know the industry. We listen to our clients. We participate in both industries and associations. And so if you came to me with some type of, I need a tax bond, I wouldn't know even
Right.
where to begin.
Right.
And I would tell you, you do not want to come to our
Right.
shop for a tax bond.
Right.
But if you have an insurance or a construction claim, we are right there for you.
Give an example of an insurance claim. Construction, kind of understand, like an insurance claim with a small business.
With a small business. So I have one that we wrapped up relatively recently where the client had a water line rupture, and it was a fairly small warehouse here in the valley. And as a result of the water line rupture, a huge slab came up, concrete slab, and they needed to go back and backfill it and do more work on it, and the expense to that was about $110,000. The insurance, so they contacted me and said, do we have insurance for this? And I said, well, let me see what you have. And they did have property insurance that covered it. The insurance company paid for most of it and then started pushing back on an exclusion. I'm very familiar with that policy. I contacted the insurance carrier in writing and said, I think if you look at the factual situation here versus your exclusion, I think you'll see where it really is not applicable to this loss, and cited case law. And eventually, pretty quickly, was able to get the carrier to accede to the request, and the client was fully compensated for the loss. And I mean, that happens all the time.
Right. I was going to say, that obviously, if something happens like that in your business, you've got to make sure that they read the policy, because it's all about the policy, right? I'm also thinking about, and right now with COVID, and I know we've talked about this once before, but I want to bring it up again because, there are so many businesses out there that did get affected by COVID, right? And can you help in their insurance, like, let's say they're a restaurant and they haven't been able to, reclaim their business back.
Yeah, well, this is about a 6-hour radio program discussion.
We'll have to do that.
So, in real short terms, almost every business has a property policy, and the property policy, among other things, provides insurance for direct physical loss or damage to property, and those are the key words. So, if you can make a claim for physical or direct physical loss or damage to your property, part of your coverage is the business income interruption. There's a world of fight going on in the courts right now and amongst the insurers and the policyholders and the insurance brokers as to what does that really mean. There's also a virus exclusion that you have to deal with. But each policy kind of stands on its own. I think we mentioned this earlier. An insurance policy is nothing more, nothing less than a written contract. So the contract terms guide how you should follow the contract. A lot of the policies have endorsements. Not all policies have the same endorsements.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not one size fits the same. So each individual client has to review their individual policy and see, do they have the coverage for this? What are the exclusions? And what endorsements do they have that might override the exclusion or might tack on further exclusions?
Well, you can call them direct and they'll do a free consultation with you, because that's really what it's all about, is having that conversation with you first off to see, do they have a claim in the first place, right? Whether or not it's a big one, like you just mentioned, where, you have water damage or what have you, but also to something small, but it isn't small. It's not small to that person.
No. And as I've mentioned before, and I am passionate about representing policyholders, but not all losses are covered. And so, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is if we feel that, it's not covered, I'll tell you. If I think it's, questionable and you're going to end up having a dogfight on your hands, we tell you that too. Because again, clients don't like surprises.
Right, no, nobody would. But I love the way that you work, but you want to make sure that they understand step by step what they're getting into, what could happen, and at the end, hopefully what that is going to be, right?
Yes.
And I love that about you. Okay, so now they work nationwide. Their website is FRLawGroup.com. They do free consultations. They're rated with the Better Business Bureau. 31 years of experience, and that's what you bring to the smaller person too. Not just the big people, but the small guys out there that need that representation. Their phone number to call direct at 602-566-7425. What would be your final words for today?
If you think that, if you get involved in a piece of litigation and you think it's going to be easy or quick, that's not reality. So you need a reality check, and make sure that whoever you hire to assist you in terms of the law firm, that they know your business and that you and the lawyer have a clear and transparent communication as to expectations.
Yeah, that connection, the right fit. It's really important to understand what everything is. Also, I want to remind everybody too, if you are dealing with anything right now and you see that fire happening, because we all know you get that email if somebody's upset with you or you had something happen, keep everything. Make sure that you keep everything, because in the long run, even as hard as it is, it'll make that just a little bit easier for everybody involved. You can call them direct. Their phone number, 602-566-7425. It's FRLawGroup.com.